Hello, friends. Today, I want to talk about the differences between various work permits. A work permit is a permission to work. At the same time, it is also a residence permit based on employment. There are several types of it. The difference lies in whether you received your residence permit as a director or as an employee by director, I mean, in your own company. That is, if you received your residence permit as a director, if you own at least 51% of the company's share capital, then your residence permit has a number of significant differences from the residence permits for all other employees. Even though you are also working, and so are they, nevertheless, you have some additional perks. Let's take a look at them. I've prepared a short outline so I don't forget to tell you anything important. So, although in both cases a work permit is issued, there are differences. First, if you are the director of your own company and own at least 51% of the share capital, you can obtain and renew your residence permit regardless of your age. So, for example, if you are 67 years old, you can come and renew it without any problem. 80 years old, no problem, you can get a residence permit. But if you are an employee and just want to work for someone somewhere in Montenegro, you cannot get a work permit if you are already 67 or older. That's the first difference. Second, a residence permit for employees cannot be converted into permanent residency in the future, whereas a residence permit for the director of their own company can be converted into permanent residency later on. Why is that? Because employees can only renew the residence permit for a maximum of 3 years. After 3 years, they have to take a break, then go and get a new residence permit. But directors of their own companies can renew their residence permit as many times as they want. And in order to obtain permanent residency in the future, you need to live in Montenegro without a break in your residence permit for at least 5 years. Directors of their own companies can meet this requirement without any problem. Employees cannot. All right, next. Directors of their own companies do not need quotas, but employees do need quotas. The Montenegrin government sets quotas every year. For example, they might decide to accept a certain number of waiters. This year, let's say 10,000 waiters, a certain number of bartenders, a certain number of cooks, a certain number of butchers, and so on. There's a long list. So if the quotas are used up, you can't get a work permit as an employee, but you can as a director, because directors don't need a quota. In practice, in most years, there haven't really been any problems with quotas. That is, people would come here without any issues and could get these work permits as employees at any time. There were no problems at all. But sometimes, I can recall 2 years when there really were quite serious problems. And those employees who arrived at the beginning of the year, for example, in February, there were still plenty of quotas, then were able to get their permits. But employees who arrived during the busy season faced the situation where the quotas had already run out, and they had serious problems with getting their paperwork done. That's it. Moving on. A residence permit for the director is always issued for 1 year. But there is an exception if you only have a short-term passport. In other words, if your passport is valid for less than 15 months, you will receive a residence permit for less than a year. If your passport has a normal validity period, then you will receive a residence permit for a year. For employees, there are also quotas for annual and seasonal employment. If the quotas for annual employment have been used up, then you will receive a residence permit not for a year but only for 6 months. Or if your employer hires you not for a year but for a season, then accordingly the same applies. Well, first of all, this means that you will have to renew your residence permit more often if it turns out that you need to extend it. Secondly, a seasonal residence permit, which is very important, does not grant the right to family reunification. In other words, you can obtain a residence permit, but your family members cannot reunite with you. That is, they cannot obtain a residence permit through family reunification. Whereas if you have obtained a 1-year residence permit as an employee, you won't have these problems. And accordingly, if you are the director of your own company, you also won't have these problems, and you simply can't have them. So that's it for this short video. I hope it was useful for you. Thank you all for watching, and goodbye.